right, it is 1 p.m. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off here. Welcome, everyone. We're ready to get started. My name is Melissa Smith. I'm the Managing Editor of Content Solutions here at HousingWire. And our topic today is Understanding Today's Connected Borrower, presented by Insellerate, BeSmartee, and LoanMonkey. A few housekeeping items. We will be having a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, and you can submit questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Also, HousingWire will be sending a webinar recording to all registrants within 24 hours. Our panelists today are Josh Friend, CEO of Insellerate, Tim Nguyen, CEO of BeSmartee, and Ashwin Dayal, President at LoanMonkey. Now I'll hand things off to Tim to get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it very much. First off, thank you, HousingWire, for having us. Really do appreciate all the effort that's involved in putting together a webinar. Josh, thank you for joining. And Ashwin, of course, thank you for having you as well. Super excited to have LoanMonkey on board with us today and really kind of walk us through their customer-first centric mindset, right? It's all about the borrower. It's all about delivering that consumer experience. And we're going to talk about the technology platforms that underlie that and underpin that, and the partnership required to really bring an exceptional consumer experience to life. And of course, the benefits are needless to be said. You'll close more loans, you'll improve the borrower's experience, you'll improve your loan officer's experience as well, you enhance retention, create customers for life, and of course, transform your acquisition lifecycle. All the goals of serving our customers better, enjoying our time, and being more effective and more efficient. With that said, we'll start with Josh. I'll hand it over to you, sir.
Great. Hey, Tim, thanks for the introduction and starting this off. And Ashwin, really excited to have both you guys here on the call, both mortgage industry veterans, understand technology, and it's going to be really great to talk about the customer experience and how LoanMonkey's really, use technology to drive that. We can go to the next slide. And I think first to think about what's important with or why experience matters. I thought it'd be helpful to look at some stats. First one, 84% of customers say that the experiences of a company 84% of customers say the experience a company provides is as important as its product and services. I mean, so you really think about that. What does that mean? That means price is on par with experience, right? So that matters. So if you have, not great experience and poor price, you're probably not going to get a lot of customers. If you have great experience, but you're not as competitive in price, you can gain more customers. It gives you more margin. And then also you gain more customers. 73% of customers say one extraordinary experience raises their expectations of other companies. We have seen this in the pandemic more so than ever before, especially around technology. Customers were downloading things like Amazon, Prime, all the different food delivery apps. And their experience has been raised in the sense of I can buy something when I want to. I can find information out about that product. I can get real-time results about that product. And someone talks to me, they communicate to me if I want to call them or I want to text them or whatever I want to do, they'll interact with me in that fashion and make it easy. And, the last stat is this, which I've always, a saying I've always had in the mortgage industry was, if you give a lot of service, you get paid a lot. You give a little bit of service, you get paid a little. 2/3 of consumers will pay more for a better experience. So from dollars and cents, it absolutely makes sense why someone should work on experience and why that matters, why that's important. So we go to the next slide. One of the things that we look at is what's the experience that your customers or mortgage industry is giving to the customers right now. And let's just talk about some basic fundamental experiences of how does the interaction start, right? That's one of the things that both BeSmartee and Insellerate really help with, which is how does that interaction start from the very beginning and then, manage it through the life cycle as well. But how does that start? Well, first off, let's just talk about a digital sense. Customers going online. We have done 3 separate MBA studies. We're actually we're doing our 4th one now, where we go out to between 500 and 1,000 lenders at a time, and we apply online and we ask them we ask them for a loan, basically. And then we time them. How often do they call us, text us, email us? When do they call us? How quickly does that take place? Now, our studies have shown the average 58% of the time that we have gone online and asked for a mortgage from a lender, there's been 0 response. And the people that did respond, it was 1.3 attempts that actually took place. People don't use text messaging as well, we're finding. Still to this day, it's not being used. So I can tell you from the upfront part of this experience, if you're not connecting with your customer, at the very beginning, you're losing customers. It's a horrible experience. I mean, first off, if you don't respond to 58% of your customers, then you're losing 58% of the customers right off the bat. So you have to manage this experience, and you need technology. Really, we'll go quickly through some of the slides that of our product, but really want to get into when Ashwin talks about how they merge our product with BeSmartee and how that delivers a great customer experience, and how they've looked at putting the customer forefront. What's their experience like? What's it like to buy a loan from LoanMonkey? These things matter. Let me go to the next slide. First, in the experience side, what you want to make sure you have is the ability to actually manage that experience, right? So you have to have a system that can do inbound, outbound call routing, that can manage leads, can manage partners, referral partners, the transaction, and also can communicate. So communicate through multiple channels, right? That's the experience, being able to email someone or text them or place a Facebook ad or a piece of direct mail or make a phone call when it's appropriate. Being able to automate all those processes becomes very important in the customer experience, because how you communicate to your customer makes all the difference in the world. And if we've been in the lending industry, or probably most industries, for a period of time, we've dealt with customers. One of the biggest things we'll see in a customer complaint and I, as a lender, I always saw this, was it always started off with something about the problem, but it said, oh, and the person didn't call me back, or I called you and no one answered. That's typically what makes a unhappy customer into an upset customer who now is complaining, where if you called them back, you could resolve it, right? We go to the next slide. So also about the experience that's really important is, what do you know about your customer? So if you can get better information about your customer, we launched a new product, Data.ie, which gives you information about your customer, lets you know things like the value of their home, recent sales in the neighborhood, equity. Just you're able to now have a more informed conversation, tailor your communication to fit what their world is. So now their experience fits them, right? You're not giving them a one size fits all t-shirt. You're giving them the experience that fits them. It's a tailored experience because it's really based off data they have. And then the last thing, we'll look at is, go to the next slide. It's just the experience of how do you then turn that into customer for life, right? What we've done is we've rolled out a customer for life tools that allow lenders to, again, take this rich data and now present it to the consumer. So on a monthly basis, you can send them a property report profile, tell them their equity, show them increases and decreases, show them all this great information. You can also turn it into a physical mail and turn it into physical touch. So now you can really envelop your customers and really give a great, amazing experience as far as how you communicate with them from the very beginning to the very end. Now, what I also see in this, and this is really great what having Tim here, is the other part is how easy is it to actually buy or find out about buying about your product. So first we talk about the connection, but now it's, how do you transact? And, most consumers will say it's very difficult to find out what they qualify for at first. They can't go online at night, and, really BeSmartee is bridging that gap. And so Tim, I'd like to hear you talk about how your tools make that buying process easier by being, empowering consumers to find out their loan options without having to interact with a loan officer, then making that transaction easier.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. One of the big things I walk away from Josh's slides here is communication is everything, right? That's how you build trust. That's how you build relationships. And whether that's a digital form of communication, text message, email, chat, or in-person conversation, at the end of the day, right, we're just dealing with, it's just people doing business with people. And once you get through the communication portion, you do build rapport, you build trust. Like Josh said, what happens then? How easy is it for me to do business with your organization, your brand? And that's where BeSmartee comes into play. So from the Insellerate funnel, that technology component of the stack flows into the BeSmartee funnel. That's where your consumers will flow into. When you look at what makes, we can go to the next slide, please. If we look at what makes a true digital mortgage, it's beyond just look and feel. It's beyond just being able to simply collect a 1003 from the consumer. you have to think deeper into that. Think about the transaction ability, the ability to see product and pricing in real time for your unique scenario. If you're a table driven or a rate driven organization, but even if you're a traditional retail organization, that's the first question out of consumer's mouth. What do you have available for me? Can I qualify? What does it cost? And to take those tools and make it easy for consumers, you also make it easy for your originators to have that information at the tip of their fingers so they can communicate that out in the way that the consumer wants to be communicated to. So you can see it goes beyond just look and feels. It digs into functionality. So from a functionality perspective, right, you have the ecosystem where the consumer lives, where they do their application, where they can search for product and pricing, look at fees in real time, accurate loan estimate quality fees. Then they have a dashboard to exchange information with the originator, with your brand. Now, but after that, well, who's going to be on the receiving end of that? That's where the MLO command center comes into play. You want to bring that consumer as close to your originators as possible. So that's why you put your originators inside the POS, where they can communicate quickly, they can answer questions quickly, and affect that consumer experience directly where it matters the most to the consumer. And of course, the real estate portal partners as well, very critical part of the equation. We can go to the next step, please. So here, we just want to dive into some detail about what that ecosystem actually looks like. Right at the very top tier here, you have your consumers, your agents, basically your customers. This is where transactions happen, is where the rubber meets the road. And that middle tier, you have your loan officers, your originators, giving them the tools to communicate out effectively through the channels that they want. Giving them allowing them to crunch information as effectively as possible, to aggregate title fees and government fees so you can answer those questions of your consumers as quick as possible and as accurately as possible as well. Or maybe they simply just want to change the loan amount, or they don't want as much cash out. This is your opportunity to effectuate those changes after listening and communicating with the consumer. And of course, all that information needs to flow well with your loan origination system, not just the 1003 loan data, but product and pricing information, underwriting information, docs, conditions, communications, audit logs. Those are things that we want to see flow back and forth. And to make the ecosystem just even a little bit more wide, we all know there's a lot of vendors that are utilized to make this happen, whereas credit verification, Insellerate, business intelligence, auditing, as we just mentioned, AUS, all this stuff plays together. So we take all that together, right? It starts with the consumers and properly communicating them, giving them the tools to funnel through and actually buy something from you in the most easy way possible, allow them to get that information as quickly and accurately as possible. And with that said, I think we should jump over to Ashwin, where LoanMonkey will walk through kind of how he delivers this type of experience right now today.
Thanks, Tim. And I appreciate you, Josh and Tim, for walking through all of those starting elements. So yeah, I'll kind of talk through how we at LoanMonkey think about bringing all of these elements together and really tying it into a unified experience. And at LoanMonkey, what we really have is we have 3 pillars of what we consider a modern digital experience for the consumer. So the first one is personalization. And if you think about, when you use Amazon knows all of your past purchase history. They know every product you've chosen, every product you've looked at. They probably buy third-party data to know even stuff you've done off of Amazon. And by doing that, they can make very personalized product recommendations. And so the first principle that we really think about is personalizations. How do we really know our customer and make our customer feel like we see them? Because everyone at the end of the day wants to be seen and heard. And I think when you hear Josh talking about clients feeling that they weren't called back, the biggest thing that happens usually when you call an upset client back is just making them feel that their complaint is heard is a huge step in the right direction. The second big thing that we think about, and I think is a really good theme for everyone to keep in mind when you think about what is it that we're now moving to with modern technology, is asynchronicity. So what I mean by this is once upon a time, the way things worked is that to get a loan, you had to call a loan officer. That loan officer had to pick up the phone, and then you guys had to actually talk at the same time. And so what that means is there's a synchronous event required, an event where both the customer and the loan officer are colliding at the same time and able to interact at the same time. And a big movement in, I think, the way technology is taking us now is the way that time can really be manipulated for us. So for example, I might be riding the subway in New York, and while I'm riding on my 45-minute commute, I use my phone. And while I use my phone, I go and I browse rates because I know I'm thinking about buying a house, and I find a rate I'm interested in, and I go ahead and submit that lead request over to LoanMonkey. But then I get off the subway and now I'm going to work, and I'm definitely not going to take that loan officer's call right now. And I'm not going to do it all day because I'm at work now. So I'm busy. And then at night, maybe when I get home after I eat dinner and hang out with my family at 9 or 10 o'clock, I'll be thinking about this again. And now, of course, there's no loan officer in the office for most of us. Some of the bigger companies do have a loan officer in the office, but if you guys are like us, we don't have the money to do that. So really what we think a lot about here is how do we create an asynchronous experience, an experience where the client can keep driving the process forward even when we're not there. And that's one of the big places where a tool like BeSmartee comes in, which is the client can go get their own pre-approval and drive a lot of the process themselves. And there's many other things we've done there as well that I'll talk to in a moment. But one of these big movements is asynchronicity. And then the third big thing, which I think Tim and Josh both talked about quite a bit, is communication. And here we have a saying that monkeys over communicate. You know, they're picking bugs off each other's backs and coordinating against hunters and so forth. But basically what we mean by that is communication is key. Our clients are not experts on the process. Most of them, some of them are, and that gets back to personalization, but most of them are not experts on the process. Many of them don't know how it works. And then on top of it, unlike buying a thing off Amazon where you can just buy it like that and you're done, our transaction can't be instantaneous. And even someday if we get the technology to do it, the TRID rules from the CFPB forbid us from making it a truly instantaneous transaction. And then on top of that, as you guys all know, we interact with third parties. So we have things that are fundamentally out of our control. And so given all this lag time between taking an action and then getting a result, being able to get that feedback that what you're doing actually makes an impact, we have to keep the consumer in the loop somehow so that they feel like things continue to move. They know that they're not forgotten about. They know that they're seen, back to point one. And so communication is a big element that we focus on here at LoanMonkey, and a big element of what we thought about as we brought these tools together. And I think the other thing I want to emphasize is that communication isn't just an external facing thing, it's also an internal facing thing. So one thing that we think about a lot is how do we make sure that when all the conditions have been uploaded to BeSmartee so that everything is checked off, our processor knows like that their loan is ready to submit to underwriting. And how do we make things like that happen faster? And so given these three pillars, the way we kind of approached both BeSmartee and Insellerate is what I call an essentialist approach, which is we think a lot about what is it that each of these tools really does at their essence. So with Insellerate, what Insellerate is really good at, or what a CRM is in general, is it's a tool that's really good at routing leads, a tool that gives you a lot of ability to automate communication. And if you have a good one like Insellerate, it'll let you do that communication in an omni-channel fashion. So we don't just think about emails and phone calls. We think about ringless voicemail. We think about SMS. And to some extent, we even think about other communication channels in the future, WhatsApp, WeChat, depending on your audience and so forth. And then, BeSmartee, being a POS system, really comes down to that essence of how do we make the transaction as easy as possible for the consumer to drive? How do we make a consumer and actually a real estate agent portal where those individuals in the transaction can drive the process themselves? And so taking that approach, if we go to the next slide, one of the ways that we try to bring this all together is that we actually put both tools in place simultaneously. So while many people may first take a lead into their CRM, then interact with the lead through a loan officer reaching out to that lead. And then when they reach out to them and get them to take an action, they then funnel them into their POS and LOS systems. What we really do is, as soon as a lead comes in from any lead channel, we funnel that lead data both to Insellerate and BeSmartee at the same time. And what this allows us to do is, one, it allows us to take advantage of all of the CRM capabilities. So we route that lead appropriately to a loan officer. We make sure the correct outbound communications go out automatically. But by funneling it to BeSmartee as well, what we've done, and we do that using their API, which is a good thing to know about, that BeSmartee has a lot of customization, as does Insellerate, if you want to take advantage of it. What that allows us to do is it allows us to pre-populate a pre-filled application for that client. So that client feels that when they put their information and went through all the questions on their lead source, we heard them that first time, and we created that personalized experience for them right then and there. And based on that, we also can have the loan officer send them a quote right out of BeSmartee itself that allows them to apply into that pre-filled app, again, hearing them and knowing the price that they selected. And based on the lead source and how we post it to BeSmartee, we can even tailor what happens in the application itself. So we know, for example, that if a client says, I'm thinking about purchasing in 2 to 6 months versus I have a purchase contract right now, those are two different intent people, and we can give them a different experience in a longer one or a shorter one based on what most tailors to what they're thinking and what they're doing. And we can even do that by lead channel. So we know that leads that come from, let's say, Bankrate are more tech savvy leads versus leads that come from, let's say, a Taboola are not as tech savvy. And so by taking advantage of all of these things, we try to create that more personalized experience. And so some of what you're seeing here is the homepage of our site, how we kind of can funnel people to a pricing engine. For the leads that I mentioned, they would actually land over past this pricing engine to where the price quotes happen, or to the application sign-up page with their info already pre-filled based on what they had said on their lead form. And then if we go to the next slide. So the other big thing, of course, is this concept of omnichannel. When you're thinking about making things asynchronous, one of the really big components is to consider how your experience is on a phone, because a lot of the microseconds that everyone gets throughout their day are taken advantage of on the phone and using their phones. And so a big part of what we focused on, especially with BeSmartee, is how do we get our brand to be phone and mobile centric, so that our customers are able to take advantage of that. The last thing I'll say about all of this is, I think everyone here who's been in mortgage knows that mortgage is a game of inches, not of miles. And so a lot of what we also have to think about here when we started moving our experience this way is, as you start implementing these tools and you let the customer have more power and let them drive more of the experience, one of the elements we had to really consider is, how do we make sure that small things don't slip through the cracks? So an example of this would be, a client has financed solar, and because they have financed solar on their property, the pricing they get is different because we can't close their loan as quickly because we're going to have to wait for a UCC to come through. And so thinking about how to capture that is one big element we also put in there. And then we really make sure that the way we've tailored BeSmartee is, when a customer comes in, they go through their application, they say they have financed solar, we populate messaging back to them right then and there that says, hey, because you have financed solar, we're going to need to do this. Based on the fact that we need to do this, your loan will take a little bit longer to close, and therefore this is the pricing you'll need to think about. And what we found is, by doing these sorts of things and setting customer expectations up front with communication, customers are a lot more amenable to these situations, versus if you don't tell the customer up front and then later you tell them, oh, hey, that pricing you saw online is not accurate because you have this situation. And I'd say that's a good primer into kind of what we're doing. And I'm happy to answer any questions everyone has afterwards.
Ashwin, I think I have a question.
Yeah.
And I think it was really interesting. I liked your breakouts of the synchronization, personalization, and really explanation of that. Being able to buy. How do you address communicating during the process, right? If a customer wants to use text, or they want to call, or they want to email, or and how you respond to them? Do how are you managing that process, or what do you think about how do you approach that appropriately or coordinated?
Yeah, so one of the big elements we look at, so for starters, we always start with all of them because we want to make sure we get the customer as soon as possible. Now, text to the stats you kind of put up earlier works really, really well for most people, especially our customer. But I think one thing that really comes to that point of personalization is it's really important for everyone to know their customer. The mortgage market is huge. Rocket Mortgage, which is the biggest one, has like 8% of the market. So all of us have our own niches to cut out. We've gone for the niche of, younger, more tech savvy clients who are very, digital, very mobile oriented. So our clients are very heavy on text messaging, but that won't necessarily be true for everyone. One of the things that's really great in Insellerate that we've taken advantage of is Insellerate has this concept of what's your preferred communication method. And so one of the things we do is we actually get that information pretty upfront from our clients pretty early on, like what's your preferred communication method in case we really need to get a hold of you. And then throughout the process, with each status that a loan goes through, we have an associated email message, text message, and other communications that go out that inform the client of like, okay, here's what's going to happen next in your loan process. Here's what's just happened. Here's where you are in the whole thing, and here's what you can expect next. And we send that out in all three forms. But then if someone, really needs to be gotten a hold of, let's say, Tim's applying for a loan and Tim hasn't gotten us X document yet, we go back, we refer to what his preferred communication method is, and we hit him specifically that way to make sure that we get in touch.
That's pretty awesome. I didn't realize you guys were doing that, so I'm learning something new. But that's that is personalization, right? Their customers telling you how they'd like you to talk to them, and that's probably the best way to talk to them. That's great.
Ashwin, I have a question for you. You talked a lot about communication, expectation, personalization just completely resonates through the way you operate. There's a lot of inspecting and understanding and precision point, execution. For other mortgage companies in the business, they're listening to this, they want to get there. Where do they start? What are the first steps, with the resources they have today? Can you give the audience an understanding of where do they start to, is it a self-assessment, understanding of the channels they serve, and then where do they go from there mentally and in execution-wise?
Yes, I think the easiest place to start, if I was doing this from scratch, again, the easiest place to start and where the most insights lie are going through the questions that you get on a day-to-day basis. So what is it that your clients are asking? And especially if you have bad reviews, which I think all of us do, including us, we're guilty too. So I'm sure all of us have bad reviews that we can go dig through. Digging through your bad reviews, I think, is also a really good place to start finding insights into where your process is falling down. And then from there, where where your process is falling down, I think that's where you can go and set expectations ahead of time. A lot of, I guess, what we think the standard is like when you're in a really good relationship, that person nails the small things and they do the small things before you even realize you need the small things. And that's kind of how we think the standard is. So if we're doing our jobs right, we answer the customer's question at the right moment, but before they thought that they had the question. And so we dig through those questions that come up a lot. We know that's the place where customers are not getting their, information properly or their expectations set properly. And that's where we start. And I think irrelevant of the type of customer you have, doing that alone will give you 80% of the freight.
Excellent, thank you.
I have a question for Ashwin. You mentioned early on about the APIs. And you mentioned that that's important. That's a term that people have been using for a long time, but it really means several different things. And I think, you guys do a great job of what I call the coordination and consistency of, communicating with your customers. So why is that important to have access to an API and be able to, interact with it and do your own stuff? I mean, you guys obviously are leveraging it very, a lot, but what does that look like? And, for lenders that don't maybe know what questions to ask or what that means, give us a little background.
Sure. So I guess maybe there's 3 levels to think of it first. So the part that I just mentioned to Tim does not require APIs. And so I know like everyone comes in with different technical resources. If you're a company that doesn't have the technical resources to use an API, I think there's still a lot you can get just starting there without using APIs. Then going from there, I guess like the quick rundown of what an API is, just so that everyone knows. It's effectively a way for you to access data from another system. So when Insellerate, for example, provides us an API, it gives us a way to grab data out of Insellerate with effectively a computer program as opposed to a person. And the reason that we are really interested in that is because of that asynchronicity concept and also trying to get deeper into levels of personalization. So because we're interested in asynchronicity, a lot of what we want to do is be able to create processes that can happen even when a person is not available. We think a lot about basically that customer who might come in at 2 a.m. and is trying to drive everything at 2 a.m. and how we can make sure that that is possible when we're not around. I'm around at 2 a.m., but anyways, no one else is. The other thing that the APIs enable us to do, and a lot of what we think about there, is how we coordinate key pieces of data from different systems and really get kind of granular about how we use that data. For example, we will use information about someone's lock, as well as information about whether they have finance solar or don't have finance solar, as well as information about which investor we've placed them with, to customize the emails that we present them or customize the text messages that they get, so that we make sure that when we tell them, here's what you should expect your disclosures to look like and where they're going to come from and what they're going to say, we've taken into account all the different parameters that actually affect what those disclosures look like and what they're going to say and what they'll have in them. So that walkthrough is really tailored to what they're going to be receiving.
And so the asynchronous experience and that data alignment is really important there. That's
exactly.
You're getting like hyper personalization with some of these customers. Some lenders are still just trying to figure out how to send a email to someone about buying a house versus just a refinance. You're getting down to what investor they may be in, what program they're at, and you're building communication around all those different facets, which I think is really fascinating. And I think it's where we see the market. That's where the market is going. That's something that we see a lot of that. You also mentioned text messaging and how you guys use that a lot with the millennials, and you saw the stat of 9% of people are actually using text versus not. I mean, how much of an impact do you really see that in your organization actually effectively using text messaging?
I would say it's huge. And I'll give you an example. So we had a client whose lock was going to be expiring on a certain day. And this was a loan where we only had to get docs signed by the time the lock expired. So we were in a situation where we needed to get the docs signed. The processor and the title company had both reached out to the client several times over like calling and email and so forth. Now this was quite a while ago, but calling and email and so forth. And now it was like 1 p.m. on the day that they either had to sign that day and they had not agreed to a signing appointment, or this lock was going to expire. So they reached out to me and they're like, hey, we're not sure what to do. We can't get a hold of this client. I sent that client a text. By 1:30, that client was scheduled to sign and got signed that day. Like that's how much of a difference it can make.
Yeah, that's huge. That's impactful.
And just maybe some context for why that client was that way, just to like think about your customers. That client's a doctor and works in a hospital. And so they can't really be answering their phone or checking their emails. But a lot of doctors have their Apple Watch and they get their text messages and they reply through that. And that's how they operate.
Yeah, that's great. I know I don't like to get, disturbed, or I operate differently. Right? Everyone has their own way of, if my insurance agent if he wants to call me to sell me something, and I'll never talk. I don't think I've ever talked to him. It's always text me. You want to sell me insurance? I don't have time to talk about it. It's not that much information. Text me. Just text me. I don't have to have a conversation. Just text me and I'll text you back what you need. So I think that's pretty powerful.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know if we have any, we do have questions from the audience. So one is, are you using two-way text? Which obviously, you can answer that, Ashwin. Are you using two-way text, and what are you using, how are you using it, or what's providing that to you?
Yeah, so 100% we use two-way text on our end. We do that both through our telephony system, which in our case is Ring Central, as well as Insellerate offers two-way texting as a functionality. So when clients reply to texts that come from Insellerate, we're able to reply right there and then.
Sabrina, you're muted.
I also saw a quick question just about LoanMonkey originating the loan or passing it to another company. The answer is it depends on the loan. We're still a pretty startup-y company. We started in 2019 in April. We've grown pretty rapidly and organically since then. So we're doing north of 125 mil a month now. And basically we broker some loans and we do delegated lending on other loans, but it depends on the loan and the program.
Sabrina, if you're talking, you're on mute, or we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. This question's for you, Josh. Why is customer experience so important for long-term lending, profitability, and sustainability?
That's a good question. I think a stat, I like to do stats. I think that, I like numbers. Black Knight came out with a number, I think it was last year, 19%, and that's 19% of customers go back to the original lender. So 81% of the time, they're not going back to you. One way to ensure customers to come back to you or not come back to you is what the experience they have during the process. All right, so just in a very simple thing, if you want to create customers for life, there's great marketing and long-term stuff, and we do that. But the truth is, if you give them an outstanding experience to begin with, you're going to get that repeat business. And if the average customer gets between 7 to 11 transactions in their lifetime, that customer, that's worth a lot of money. So to do this right is extremely impactful. And I've been saying this for the last year or so during this refinance boom. Make sure your customer experience is amazing, because in 2 years, and the rates are a little bit higher, you want those people to be coming back to you when they're purchasing their next home, because the refinance market may not be there. There may not be as many transactions. So customer experience is what helps you with longevity as well as a lender.
Excellent. Next question here. Can you speak more to any automated pre-qual or pre-approval process you have? Can borrowers generate their own letter and customize it?
Yeah. So I'll talk to maybe 3 levels of that. So firstly, on the kind of pre-qual / pre-approval front, through BeSmartee, clients right now can basically go ahead, fill out the application. They automatically can have credit pulled. They automatically can choose pricing, and they'll automatically have Fannie run on them. So DEO/DU. Pretty soon, LPA is getting rolled into that as well. On our side, we've rolled out a dual AUS solution that we're using to kind of run both simultaneously and be able to grab things like appraisal waiver information or streamlined qualifications based on GSE. And then based on that, we can do pre-approval. Now here at LoanMonkey, we are taking a verified pre-approval process as well. So similar to Rocket and Better and some of those other players, you can get that automated pre-approval from AUS, but it won't be as good as sort of the verified pre-approval. The verified pre-approval includes an actual review of the documents. So we have the client actually submit their documents, review those documents, and verify that those documents really do attest to the income and so forth that they claimed in their application. And something we are rolling out hopefully in the next 2 months is we are rolling out an AI underwriting system, again, to get at sort of this asynchronous process where clients will be able to submit all of their documents. The documents will be submitted to the AI underwriting system, and within 4 hours, the AI underwriting system will churn out a result. So you apply 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. By 3 a.m. on Sunday, you'll have a bona fide underwriting approval, minus, of course, third-party conditions.
Thank you, Ashwin. This one's coming in for Tim at BeSmartee. Can you describe how BeSmartee helps take the relationship built in Insellerate and turn them into real customers? So somebody that closes a loan with the lender in the easiest, fastest, and most transparent way possible.
Sure. So, a lot of this information from customers will live in Insellerate, right? You know about them, you know their history, you know their contact information, you know their preference, what they're looking to do, their intent. That information, I think one of the critical things that we see LoanMonkey do or does do with our two products is take that information and pre-populate it in. What we do here, we have a very simple philosophy when designing a POS application. Less screens, less keyboard strokes, less clicks of the mouse, right? Less questions, less to do. And if you ask people for less, you'll get more. So that also means, right, we take that information and we use what we will derive information to complete that 1003. We'll calculate information to help complete that 1003, and we'll automate the data from various sources to help complete that 1003. The end result being you take this picture of a consumer that you know, and you funnel them into the right application experience. You make that experience as short, as quick, as clean, as seamless as possible. Get them as far along as possible in the shortest amount of time. That's a great experience when you spend 10, 15 minutes going through, answering questions, pouring your heart out, every detailed question that a mortgage lender needs. And then at the end of it all, if you get a thanks, we'll get back to you, well, that wasn't a very good experience. You got the data you wanted, and hopefully if you get them on the call, you're going to get their engagement and sell them a loan. But, consumers nowadays, right, from the very first moment of contact with the Insellerate channel all the way through the transaction period in BeSmartee, they want something for their time. They want instant gratification. Is it a pre-approval letter I get at 11 p.m. because I have a showing at 8 a.m. tomorrow with my real estate agent? Is it just product and pricing so I know what my options are? People want that process to continue. Again, going back to asynchronous communication, this is the best time for me. I don't want to wait till tomorrow. I'm at work tomorrow. I got my kids to take to school tomorrow. I can't have that conversation. I need to transact right now. My turns, my way, my time.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Next one here is for Josh. How is data transforming how lenders can personalize their message?
Well, I think great question, but I think Ashwin and Tim probably we really described that just now, which is, LoanMonkey is using it down to what investor they're going to sell a loan to, right? So that data around your customer, or what's the preferred method of communication, history about the customer. So that's, the level of personalization, you can really get that, in the weeds, if you will. And that, I think that's what consumers expect. You go to Amazon, and Ashwin, you're right, you brought it up. When you go on there, they know what you bought. So it can, it gives them suggestions, and maybe it says, reorder this thing because it needs something to be reordered for it. Right? That's great personalization. And guess what? We all buy more because of it, right? Because that makes it easier for us.
To maybe feedback on that, I would say what we do right now, we consider kind of level one of where I think personalization is going. Level two, or maybe parallel to level one, is a bit of what Josh talked about in the slides around, now I've gone ahead and helped this customer with their home purchase or their refinance. What else can I do for that customer as they evolve through their life cycle, and how do I retain that customer and build them over time? So I think there's a lot of easy data grabs just around when that customer does their next purchase, how they list their home, when they might be eligible for a lower rate based on their LTV or credit score changing, a lot of these types of things. And there are a few vendors who specialize in helping you kind of build that without having to build that. So Sales Boomerang is a good example, and that's integrated into Insellerate already. So that's one tool you can definitely use. If you're a broker and you're working wholesale with UWM, then UWM also offers that kind of built into their Brand 360 platform. which is another option. And then I think level 3 that we really think about is also around what we do with what communications someone gets. And I think part of where we're going with this is we're actually starting to go into, we don't do this yet today, but this is where we're going into, you know, based on how many loans this client has done with us before, how they interacted in the process already, how much they told us they did or didn't know, and how many questions they had or didn't have. You know, how much communication do we really need to give a client? Because some clients, you know, if they already know the process and they're really well integrated into it, they don't want all that communication. Other clients, because, you know, they're totally new, they're a first time home buyer, they really have no idea how it works. They want a ton of communication, and they even do want that synchronous phone call, in which case we have to jump out of our asynchronous paradigm a little bit to give them that human feel, so that they feel like, again, we really saw them and really took it the way they wanted to go. And so I think, you know, what we talked about today is just the base level of where we're thinking about going.
Great. Next question here. How is processing being organized in any of these systems?
I guess if you guys want, I can kind of talk to that too. So yeah, on the processing side, and obviously there's a few different elements to processing, of course, but there are kind of 2 ways that we look at using processing in these systems. Starting with BeSmartee, just because that's the more obvious place and it's the place that we started. You know, BeSmartee is where the client is going to do all of their interaction. What we want the client to feel is that BeSmartee is their window into doing stuff with LoanMonkey. And so, and in general, that's how we think about POS. You know, if you're using a different POS system, that's still how we would encourage you to think about it. And so, you know, in a POS system, clients can go and they can upload their conditions to the portal. And similarly, we can put new conditions for them in the portal. And so that's a lot of where processing lives, is doing that. We also make sure that all documents are sent through the POS system itself. As I'm sure many of you know, email is not really a secure way to be sending things. So we don't do things through email as far as sending actual documents. We put all of those through the POS system itself. And that's, I guess, some of the basics of how processing interacts. On the Insellerate side, one of the really cool features Insellerate has, which actually changed a little bit about how we think about things, is a concept known as priority alerts. And so the way that works is that Insellerate allows you, based on status and how long something has been in a status, to put it in a priority queue. And then when someone goes into Insellerate, they can see, oh, here's my list of priorities for today. Okay, I'm calling that client first, then that client, then that client, then that client, then that client. Now, I think the way most people think about that is on the sales side, but we've actually spent a lot of time thinking about how we can use that in ops as well. Like, client has been sitting in the status of in processing and not submitted to underwriting yet for 2 days. Okay, that's a high priority for a processor to reach out to. Now it's been 3 days. Actually, we've reprioritized it to the loan officer at that point. And we think a lot about how we can build these red flag escalation systems. And Insellerate is a good tool for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Ashwin. Those are all the questions we have now from the audience. Anything else we'll take offline, but I'll pass it back over to you, Melissa. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sabrina. And thank you to all of our panelists. That was a great webinar. If you submitted a question that the panel didn't have time to answer, we will get an answer back to you. Just as a reminder, HousingWire will be sending out the webinar recording to all registrants within the next 24 hours. And the webinar will also be available in our Knowledge Center at housingwire.com. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.